Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wisdom Seeker Live podcast for Monday, and appreciate you being here. Look forward to hearing from everyone as you join. Hope that you will also let us know where you're joining from, and also ask that you engage in comments and questions as we go along because your engagement makes the podcast much more interesting. And so look forward to uh, engaging with you. As always, I like to start the day by talking about um, how we see wisdom on the Wisdom Seeker Live podcast. And wisdom is a journey. This journey starts with knowledge, and we gain knowledge formally, informally, hopefully on a daily basis. We pick up new knowledge and learn something new in that regard. Key is, though, knowledge is just the beginning. It's not the stopping point. It's also not where we gain value and power from. It's the beginning. Next step in this process is when we move from knowledge to understanding. We begin to apply the knowledge that we've gained in our life and use it in such a way to make it practical, to make it purposeful, and to make good decisions and choose how to uh, grow in our understanding and our experience. And in the last but most important step in the wisdom journey is when we move into wisdom. And the way we do that is by beginning to see things outside of ourselves, see things from a much bigger perspective, begin to see how our knowledge and understanding not only affects us inwardly and outwardly, but also how it affects others, how it affects the bigger world around us. That's such a key part because when we begin to see things from that vantage point, we make better choices. We have gained better insight. And for those of us that are of a spiritual bent, the value of gaining wisdom is that we are seeing things through God's eyes. We are getting a perspective that is much more insightful for us. So that's about the wisdom journey for those of us as we go along. And hopefully, we all are beginning to seek to gain wisdom each day. And it's very important, by the way, that we not just let wisdom come along without purpose. Seek it, look for it, because it's an important part for us to gain that wisdom if we're going to grow and we're going to improve, and also as we want to help others. So I hope that each day that you will become a wisdom seeker in your life so that you get the benefits of that wisdom along the way. Such an important part for us as we grow. So today we are going to talk about wisdom and forgiveness. And the reason that we want to uh, uh, think about forgiveness is, it would be easy to say, well, I offer somebody forgiveness, they receive it. They offer me forgiveness, I receive it. And in an ideal world, that's the way it works, should work, and should be pretty simple. But the way life is, rarely does it work as we anticipate. And so we need to consider different elements of it. Excuse me. We want to be sure that initially, one of the big things is that we receive forgiveness and accept it. Uh, One of the challenges is that we go around, a lot of us, never having received forgiveness. So we are living in a constant state of guilt and dealing with our having that guilt based on that unforgiveness. And what is scary is that unforgiveness, if we carry that, either unforgiveness for someone else or unforgiveness for ourselves, it can lead to bitterness. And that's something we don't want to get involved with. Good morning, Zaid. Glad to have you with us. I always look forward to hearing your thoughts. So, wisdom and forgiveness. Forgiveness is a choice, by the way. It's not a feeling. When we forgive others, we sometimes have to choose. No, we always have to choose. And what happens is it may take time for the emotional part, the feeling of forgiveness, to become a part of our person. And so we just need to understand forgiving people is a choice, just like asking for forgiveness is a choice. And one of the things we need to consider is that when we do something wrong, we make a wrong choice, say a wrong word, wrong action towards someone else, and they know that it's happened, then we need to seek forgiveness. And one of the things that concerns me is we've become very casual in regards to this, to the point that it has become more popular and in many regards easier to just say, "Oh, I'm sorry." Okay. I'm sorry is fine, and there's a place for it. But when we do something that truly hurts someone, or they do something that hurts us, I think that there is a lot of wisdom in having them or you offering that you ask for forgiveness. The question of asking forgiveness or giving forgiveness is much more impactful than casually saying, "I'm sorry," or what we have come to do in our current cultures is just go, "Oh, sorry." And I think we have, by doing so, minimized the act of asking forgiveness or giving forgiveness. And when we ask forgiveness, we say, need to recognize, take responsibility for what we've done. I know that I did X to you, and as a result of realizing that and knowing that I've done wrong, I am asking you to please forgive me. And the follow up, and again, there is wisdom in how we choose to respond. Good morning, Rick. So glad to have you there with us today. As always, look forward to your thoughts and insights. And when we give forgiveness, I think that we need to be wise in our choice of phrasing there and be very intentional to say, "Oh, I will forgive you, and I understand, and you are forgiven." It doesn't have to be complicated, but very intentional in how we respond. That becomes important. Another challenge we face in our culture is that somebody asks, or we ask for somebody's forgiveness, and their response is, "Oh, no big deal." I think that is an easy way out, and I think it's a way to not fully address the issue that is being forgiven. Good morning, Lee. Glad to have you as always. Look forward to your comments as well. And when others ask us forgiveness, when we say, "Oh, no big deal, no problem, don't think of anything of it, whatever," again, I think we're avoiding dealing with the issue that is at hand, because forgiveness is not just a phrase, it's a process of acknowledging either we've done something wrong or someone else has done us wrong. And as part of that acknowledgement, we are beginning to accept the responsibility involved on our part. And by using the phrasing, and I'm not usually quite so particular about words, but using the phrasing of I am asking forgiveness or I am giving forgiveness is important, because it implies, it also emotionally carries the responsibility of that choice, the responsibility of asking for the forgiveness or the responsibility for giving forgiveness. And so be very intentional about this, because it's powerful. When we just glaze over it or try to just pass by it with no problem, I didn't think anything of it, that kind of thing, we still are not taking responsibility. And I believe as a result, we do not emotionally deal with it. And as a result, it lingers in our life. Lee makes a comment that is very good, and that is, forgiving doesn't mean forgetting or no consequences. Indeed, when I forgive someone or I receive forgiveness, that is a relational issue that we deal with someone. And in terms of forgetting, it will, if we don't give or receive forgiveness, we definitely won't forget. But even in the process of giving or receiving forgiveness, we must do that if we have any chance of that emotional, that forgetting piece to not hang around. The ultimate goal is that when we can release someone or be released through the forgiveness process, is that it sets us up to emotionally heal, so that the forgetting part at some point, generally speaking with time, the forgetting occurs. It becomes a non-issue, or at least it becomes a non-emotional issue. But it doesn't happen instantly, generally speaking. And we'll talk some more in depth, but ultimately, depending on the situation, the forgetting part may take quite a process. It may take time and additional effort depending on what happened in the particular offense. And by the way, when we ask forgiveness, it's because we have hurt someone, we have offended them, and it's even beyond just a surface thing. It is generally deeper and has a lot of emotional attachment to it. And same with receiving forgiveness, because both parties involved have offense. And so we just really need to think about that. And then to Lee's second point, and this is so critical. Yes, I can forgive someone. For example, we get in an accident and they break the law. And as a result of the choice to break the law, they cause an accident. And they can come to me and say, oh, please forgive me. And I will, generally speaking, choose to forgive them for both of our sakes. But that won't change the fact that if you broke the law, there are consequences that occur. And even if you didn't break the law, there's still consequences. My forgiving someone or them forgiving me doesn't erase the fact that you've got broken vehicles that have to be addressed, and time loss, and possibly injury to ourselves physically. So yes, you're correct. Forgiveness doesn't mean you erase everything from consequences. The purpose of forgiveness is right relationships. The most important right relationships with our Creator, and learning to accept forgiveness from our Creator is important. And there is a way to go about receiving that forgiveness. And it's a key part of us being able to be healthy and to be able to forgive others as well. And it's we'll have, maybe we do a show on that. I don't know. But suffice it to say, process of forgiveness is, first of all, important. Second of all, the priority is to always, as much as humanly possible, to always forgive or always seek forgiveness. That's priority. That is just so key, because I believe we have a lot of people, especially, and this is related to family, we have a lot of people in families that are going around with unforgiveness. And it is very devastating. And the longer it goes, the more devastating it can be. And one of the things that we need to understand is not giving and receiving forgiveness has impact on us, because it affects us mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Oh goodness, sorry, Zaid, to hear that you're having some technical issues. I think everything on this side seems to be working, but if you continue to have a problem, let me know and I'll see what I need to do on my end. So the concept of forgiveness is such an important concept in our culture. You know, we talk about conflict, we talk about people not getting along. And at the heart of most any issue, it has to do with giving and receiving forgiveness. Because if we don't do that, we don't have a chance to have a healthy relationship with whoever is involved. And we as an individual, if we don't seek and receive forgiveness, we can't be healthy either. And we will find it very hard to forgive others, because those processes are designed to be mutual. And if we aren't willing to ask and receive forgiveness, then we are really having a big problem. And the outcomes are that we are not released from mental and emotional pieces involving that relationship until we can address that forgiveness. Lee makes a comment. He says, we're an unforgiving society, blocking and canceling people who we disagree with, even for years old words or actions. Indeed, we have come to a point in our culture, our society, where we think that it's not that important to forgive. We think it doesn't have consequences. And sometimes we even think, well, I don't want to forgive them because they hurt me so badly. That's a choice and that's an option. But what we've got to understand is unforgiveness affects both parties. It's not about just one party involved. Welcome, Professor Jagdish. Glad to have you with us today. So, yes, we have become an unforgiving society. And I'll be honest, I think part of that is because we've become an unwise society. We don't value wisdom any longer, because when we see the effects of giving and receiving forgiveness, or not giving and receiving forgiveness, which is part of wisdom, when we began to see that, we realize that ignoring those situations and going around without being forgiven or giving forgiveness, and see the consequences of it. Yeah, we're going to address it. We're going to deal with it. Yes, it can be painful. And part of the reason that we don't quite often give and receive forgiveness is because it can be painful. The process can be a very big challenge. I know that in my life that I went through years ago a process, and this is related to emotional wounding, that I realized that I was having trouble with relationships in my workplace. And by the way, if you're interested, I have an article on LinkedIn about this, but I had a problem getting along with certain type of people. And what I realized is it was based in some unforgiveness, both given and received on my part. And in this case, it was related to unforgiveness related to my parents. And when I began that process and started addressing it, making choices to move forward, it was painful. It was very painful at moments because it dealt with things that had occurred in my relationship to my parents that had gone undealt with on a giving and receiving side. And so part of the reason we have become an unforgiving society is the pain involved and the unwillingness to endure the pain to get the result. I was blessed and fortunate enough that once I began to deal with this issue that I had in my life, it began the healing process to a point now that the impact, relational impact that had not only between me and my parents, but between me and other people began to improve. And so again, if you're interested, there is, if you go to my profile on LinkedIn and you look up articles and you look up the Cocky Rooster article, you can read more about that journey I had in regards to working through forgiveness and that process. So one of the key points is we need to be willing, ready, and able to offer forgiveness or to ask forgiveness. And that means taking responsibility for the choices we make in regards to other people. And that could be the responsibility of wrongdoing or the responsibility of accepting that someone has hurt us. Sometimes we will go through a process and try to deny that we've been hurt by someone. That sounds nice on the surface, and it sounds very helpful or whatever, but it's not. Because if we don't go through the forgiveness process, then we get stuck. And it can be bad enough. In the example I was sharing about that with my parents, that I got stuck. And I can tell you that it caused me in some regards to be stuck emotionally at the period of time where it culminated, which meant that I was emotionally stuck at around 13 years old. And that's not healthy. And unfortunately, though, there are many of us out here that are stuck. And if we really face it and deal with it, we begin to realize that we're stuck. And I will even go a step further, and I'm going to probably get myself into some, maybe some problems with this, but it's especially a problem among us men because we tend, both culturally and just because of our wiring, we tend to, rather than address these issues, we compartmentalize it. We put it in a box and close the lid and pretend like it never happened. Or we so quickly do it, we don't realize that it happened. And unless we see symptoms and begin to search out the source, we will miss it. Excuse me, got a frog in my throat this morning. Professor Jagdish makes a comment, and he's sharing a very old but wise phrase, and that says, to err is human and to forgive is divine. And that is just so very true. And that's why that saying's been around a long time. And it points to the value of going through the process of forgiveness, both giving and receiving. And it is such a critical piece. Now, by the way, everyone, I'm noticing on my end that the internet seems to be dragging, so it may be that I'm experiencing some technical challenges on my side, and if so, I apologize. But we'll keep on rolling. We can't let a little technology ruin our day or take away our opportunity. So, indeed, the value of forgiving and being forgiven is at the level of being divine. The impact on us, the impact on others in our relationships warrant addressing this well. And I encourage everyone to really consider this process. Where are you with it? And where are you in relationships in terms of both giving and receiving forgiveness? Such a critical piece, because when we go around and have not received or given forgiveness as needed, we get stuck and we get poisoned, if you will. It is such that not having that will hurt us. It may or may not be consciously affecting other people, but it will hurt us. And there is so much evidence to support this. And we're talking not just emotionally and mentally. Eventually, if it goes unaddressed, it will affect our physical health. And again, so much science is beginning to understand this, and that's why there's more scientific reason to say we need to exercise the process of giving and receiving forgiveness. Now, one of the things that we need to be mindful of is that giving and receiving forgiveness in an ideal world is a two-way street. And so what we really need to be mindful of and get wisdom in is how to approach it, because our timing in approaching giving and receiving forgiveness, our words we choose in seeking to give or receive or both forgiveness is important, because when we are dealing with the issues that deserve or should have forgiveness involved, we've got to realize that it can cause issues. I have seen well-intended people want to either seek out and receive or to give forgiveness to someone, and they go about it in an unwise fashion, and as a result, it actually makes things worse. And so we have to be wise in our approach. If both parties decide and agree to give and receive forgiveness in relationship to a situation, that works out great. But by the way, the process of that coming to reality is something that isn't done just in one action of asking or giving forgiveness. Generally speaking, it involves follow-up and involves additional choices in that relationship. And by the way, I know I'm getting into some details that maybe most people don't consider, but the fact that there is more to it than just words is why I believe we have, as Lee said, become an unforgiving society. We're too busy doing and being that we don't think it's important. And it also because we can isolate ourselves from the relationships that are involved. We think no big deal. We don't think there's an issue. We can isolate ourselves from whoever that problem is with. But if we have unforgiveness on either side of the issue, it's going to stick with us. It's going to follow us. And I can, in fact, I have coached people. And as we talk about their issues that they need to work with in their life, a lack of motivation, lack of ability to get on with their life, it is not unusual to find out that ultimately it comes back to a lack of forgiveness. That's what gets people stuck in a certain place, is that lack of forgiveness, and where it causes us to get stuck. And so uh, again, the importance of choosing to forgive and or receive forgiveness is so critical. And I hope that we will make the effort to choose to take responsibility for our part of a situation in a relationship. And as a result, we will choose to address the question of forgive people. And I just realized, I think it's a technology issue, but Professor Jagdish uh, is kind enough, and I know Professor Jagdish and his willingness to express that he asked forgiveness for being late. Professor Jagdish, you are forgiven, and I appreciate you asking. Being late on the podcast is something that we don't account for necessarily and assume that people are going to always be timely. But indeed, you've asked for forgiveness, and you are given forgiveness, sir. And I appreciate your willingness to speak up and ask for that. Let's see. Zaid has a comment, and let's see. Hopefully, it will show up here in a moment. Again, I'm not sure why the process is moving so slowly. Seems that maybe, again, I've got some technology challenges on my end. See if I can make some adjustments here and see if it will help, and hopefully get things working a little better here. Bear with me, making some minor adjustments to see if we can resolve this. But Zaid's comment or question is, how can someone didn't experience forgiveness to offer it, or even understand receiving it? Most people will take it, and especially at the corporate world, as weakness. We would harbor the thought, oh goodness, technology is keeping it interesting this morning. So let me bear with me here. And corporate world as weaknesses, we would harbor the thought, if he, she hopefully you are. I'll continue moving forward. And Zaid's question is a valid one, and that is concerned that some people will ask, or if we choose to give or receive forgiveness, they will respond as if we are less than, or for some reason weak. And it's certainly a challenge. It's a part of our culture that is not healthy, but it is a reality. And but the value or importance of dealing with it far outweighs any potential issue that, or perception that might be there in my mind. And when we realize that the choice to not address it is such that the consequences of not addressing it are so important that we will readily choose to go through that process. When we see the importance of doing that, then we will overcome whatever obstacles stand in our ways in seeking out forgiveness or giving forgiveness. Lee makes a comment here. And again, I'm having some technical difficulty, but his comments forgive the lateness, but next time bring a note. He's joking around. But in the joke, he makes a point of that we need to recognize that we forgive people, no doubt about it. But that forgiveness that we forgive to others or receive from others doesn't absolve the consequences always, such as needing to, for a time, to, if there is a problem, to make up for it by communicating, whatever. So yes, I get it, Lee. That point is well taken. So choosing timing in asking for forgiveness or for giving forgiveness. Timing is important. Going to someone that, for example, that we have hurt and going with them at the wrong timing could actually make things worse. We may be intended on helping to resolve the relational issue, and that's great. But that doesn't necessarily mean we do it at whatever time is convenient for us. We should be very thoughtful about that timing. And even if we go to someone to offer forgiveness, again, timing is important. I'll come back to offering forgiveness because there's another component. So timing of asking forgiveness is real important, as well as the words we choose in asking forgiveness. That becomes very important because if we start off and say, well, I'd like to be forgiven, but generally speaking, whatever we say after the word but is making our asking forgiveness hollow. Because if we really are believing that we need to be forgiven, there is no but. We either need to be forgiven and therefore are asking for it, or we don't. And so the idea that we're going to come in and say, please forgive me, but if you had done this, then that. Unwise and ineffective, and can actually cause more problems than we had before. So our timing is important. Some people and choose to do this generally in a very public way. Asking forgiveness of someone generally should be done in a private fashion and handled that way, generally speaking. As far as the words, we need to, if we're seeking forgiveness, we need to choose well and say, I was wrong. Not I was wrong, but I was wrong, or it's I was, and I would be specific in explaining what we know we did wrong. And then follow up with, because I've done this wrong, I'm asking you to please forgive me. And then wait. The idea is we want to get a response. And if we don't get a response, it may be that we have to go on to say, well, I understand your hesitance to give me forgiveness for what I did because it was so hurtful or such a bad thing. But I'm again asking you to please forgive me. And if we still don't get a response, because by the way, it is possible that someone chooses not to give forgiveness. That doesn't mean we shouldn't ask, because the act of asking forgiveness has its own benefit and healing effect. It might not give, and so we'll really be thoughtful and go through that process. Indeed, that's important, and need to really work on it. My apologies again, technology issues this morning. Hopefully just resolved that one. Let's see here. Okay, hopefully that's resolved that. So timing, word choice, and then going through the process of waiting and expecting that someone will respond. And sometimes it may be necessary, if we're asking for forgiveness, to ask multiple times. And it may be that asking forgiveness takes multiple times. And during the process of waiting to receive forgiveness, it may be that part of what it will take is seeing the other person to see a change in our behavior, to realize that we are genuine in asking for forgiveness. Let's see. Okay. Lee makes a comment. I think we're back on track with our technology. It says, unless the wrong words or actions were done or said publicly. And that could be an exception, Lee. And there are times where that's appropriate. But I would suggest that even if this occurred publicly, that we be very considerate of whether we ask for forgiveness publicly or not. I would suggest that go to that person in private first, and then if they want the request for forgiveness to be public, then we need to be willing to do so if that's the circumstance that it happened in. But I believe, generally speaking, initially, it's always best to approach it in a private manner, because even if it happened publicly, to then go through the process of asking for receiving forgiveness can reopen emotional wounds or responses for that other person, especially if, for example, that person is more of an introverted person. So we've got to consider a lot of different factors rather than just blurting out, please forgive me because I did this wrong. That's why I realized that there could be value in sharing wisdom related to forgiveness. It's not a question of whether we should ask for or receive forgiveness. That's a foregone conclusion, because to not go through the process is unhealthy for anyone involved in the process. So it's just, again, so important. So what now we're talking about is going through the process of asking for or giving forgiveness. Lee makes another comment. Sometimes, indeed, and if we're the offending party, we should be willing to do that, no doubt. And so to say, well, I need to do this only private, if we've done wrong, we will be willing to take the consequences that come from dealing with the forgiveness, which may be doing so publicly and facing our own amount of embarrassment or pain publicly, no doubt. Again, start private, but if we've wronged someone publicly, be willing to acknowledge that publicly, but do so as part of working through that with the other individual to see if that's something that they want to happen. Welcome, George. Glad to have you from Scotland. Thank you for joining us. So, in asking for forgiveness, timing is something we need to consider. Second thing is the words we choose in asking. Avoid "I did wrong, but," or starting out or "I did wrong, but if you had only," whatever. Those things are unwise approaches. And then the last part is don't just ask forgiveness and assume you got it and go on. Wait and look for someone to acknowledge and give the forgiveness, because if they don't, it keeps us from being as free as we need to be, and it doesn't have the positive effect in their life. And so if need be, we may have to ask more than once. And if we start puffing our chest up and say, well, I made my effort, and the problem is now theirs, see, to me, that indicates we haven't taken responsibility for whatever we did wrong and what the results are from it. And that's a key part. If we take responsibility for actions that choices result in needing to ask forgiveness, then take full responsibility. And if we take full responsibility, we understand the gravity of that situation, and we have an attitude, which is humility, and an attitude of, I messed up, and to a point that, first of all, it's important to seek forgiveness. Second of all, is to not have expectations of others. One of the things we need to even say, especially if we ask forgiveness and the person that we've asked forgiveness of either doesn't respond or they say, no, I won't forgive you, we need to understand and acknowledge that that can happen. And that if that happens, it's one of the consequences that we're receiving for our choice to do something wrong. So, and even acknowledge that to the party involved. Even go so far as to say, I understand why you might not want to forgive me, because what I did was so bad. But I would encourage you to ask again, and even ask, what can I do to earn that forgiveness from you? When we start doing that, approaching it with that attitude, that spirit, it changes things. But if we're not willing to do that, we either don't recognize the importance of being forgiven, or we haven't fully owned the responsibility for whatever we did wrong. Because if we know we're wrong, we need to be willing to do whatever it takes to right that wrong as part of being forgiven. So very important. Now, in terms of giving forgiveness, it's a real challenge, because sometimes we are hurt and offended by people, and unfortunately, they may not even be aware that it's happened. And that's part of our culture, and its self-centeredness that has become such a part of it. Let's see, before I go any further, Zaid has a couple of comments. One is, our words have power. Indeed, that's why it's so important that we choose well what words we use. And then Zaid makes another comment, says our words have power, whether negative or positive. It's how we position them and what word we use in the moment. That's why we need to listen twice more than talking. Indeed, And this process of asking for or giving forgiveness is so important that we need to take the time and effort to make sure that we're wise in our approach. Again, sometimes something happens, we do a wrong, we ask forgiveness, the other person says, sure, you're forgiven, and we can move on. But there are times where the hurt caused, the pain caused by our action that causes us to need to ask for forgiveness is so great that the process of giving and receiving forgiveness may not be instant. It may take time. It may take changes in actions. It could be a lot of things, but the consequence of not doing it are much greater than whatever consequences are required or our choices to overcome it. And however painful or difficult that is, it's still worth it for our benefit as well as the other person's. So very good comment there, Zaid. Thanks. But giving forgiveness, there are times where we are offended, we're hurt. And unfortunately, the person that causes that offense or that hurt has no clue that they've done it. And we can kind of explain it away and ignore it, but that's unhealthy for us, because when we hold on to that hurt and hold on to the pain from what they chose to do and just kind of try to pass it off, it doesn't just disappear and go away. And example of this is when you have people that, first of all, in that situation, hold a grudge, and we choose never to encounter that person for whatever reason. I was talking to someone yesterday, and they were sharing how that in their family, that their entire family was fractured over this whole issue of not asking for nor receiving and or giving forgiveness, to a point that ultimately to this day that their family doesn't even acknowledge each other. And one of the family members passed away, and the offending party was a brother. And when this person passed away, this brother was not even acknowledged as part of that process of going through and working through that death. And this is all related to lack of asking for or giving forgiveness. And the implications are truly sad and remarkable, and including and especially in families. We have family members that are very offensive and don't even know it. Or we have family members that are offended and never ask or never offer forgiveness to the person offending. Now, again, this is where you have to be really thoughtful of how you approach it. Yes, give forgiveness. And when you realize that you're harboring or holding on to some hurt for something and you need to really forgive that person. But if they're not aware that they have offended you, then the process is more than just going to them and say, oh, by the way, I forgive you. You can stir up a whole nother set of problems by that approach. What may be necessary, if you're prepared to forgive someone and you want to be healthy in that situation for yourself and for the relationship, you may need to go to that person and have a conversation and say, do you remember when, and explain the circumstances and explain that you were hurt and offended. May be necessary for them to even be aware of it. And hopefully at that point they go, yeah, I remember that. They still may not understand the offense, And so it may be something you have to work through, and it could be hard and it could be painful. But I would remind you, the result of not doing so is harmful to you, because it causes you to hold on to that emotion, and it again will lock you in time in that emotion, and it can be devastating. And so Lee offers a comment. Oh, sorry. I tell you what, things move sometimes. He says, Bible story of Judah and Tamar acknowledging wrong behavior. Now, one of the nice things is that, and I'm very upfront about the fact that I believe that the Bible is full of a great deal of wisdom, whether you acknowledge the tenets of faith. But and one of the great wisdoms that are in the Bible is about giving and receiving forgiveness. The example of Judah and Tamar. And then Rick goes on to raise another example, and that is, if Jesus forgave those who nailed him to the cross, we should forgive everyone. Indeed, that in fact is part of the basis for giving and receiving forgiveness. And as I shared earlier, the first step is for us to seek and receive forgiveness in our relationship to our Creator. And for many of us, the process that helps to address that forgiveness is what the life of Jesus and what he did, which included suffering death for our benefit. And so, again, important first step, one way or another. We all approach things differently. I know I have my set of beliefs and hold them very closely, but one way or another, whatever words or way you choose to go about it, getting forgiveness from our Creator is an important part of it, because that's the first issue of receiving forgiveness. It also gives us perspective to realize that as humans, we're not perfect, and how to begin to live and address that imperfection. And it starts with receiving forgiveness for our own issues in relationship to our Creator. That opens the door to be able to effectively give and receive forgiveness with our fellow human beings. And it also sets a precedent for us to make it important to go through the process. So as we wind down our time, important is that giving and receiving forgiveness, whether or not to do it, that in my mind's foregone conclusion, that it is such a critical part of being healthy as a person that it needs to happen on an ongoing basis, that it needs to be a process that is important to us on a daily basis. Okay, so that being said, the wisdom that we need to find is how we approach it. And don't assume that you just walk up, ask for forgiveness, and somebody says, oh, everything's fine, you're forgiven, and we move on. Sometimes it works that way, and it's a beautiful thing. But many times it is a process we have to work through. And it involves choosing wisely in a lot of ways. Timings, words, our responses to either the request to forgive or the request to be forgiven. All of it we should be mindful and wise in our approach, because the benefit to us as a person and to those around us, those we're in relationship with, is so important. This very question can make or break relationships, even for a lifetime, depending on how we approach it. So I encourage everyone, seek and give forgiveness on a regular basis, whatever that is required. But as we go about doing so, be wise about it. Be wise about your timing, be wise about your words chosen, and be wise in how you respond. All very important. So I hope today you've gained some insights, and I appreciate all of you sharing your thoughts on this issue. And I hope that each of us as wisdom seekers make it a priority to give and receive forgiveness and do it in a wise fashion. So thanks, everyone. We'll be back next Monday. Look forward to next Monday's topic. Haven't decided it yet. If you have something, a topic that you would like to have addressed, suggest it, and be more than happy to consider it if at all possible. Thanks, everyone. God bless. Have an amazing week, and look forward to seeing you next Monday. Bye now.